Right.
And all of the variables that nobody had any idea were there
No.
are like, well, wait, what? AI is this beautiful, shiny thing. And then you kind of look and you go, but wait a second, that doesn't seem about right. That doesn't seem right.
All right, welcome back to the BigCheese.AI podcast. My name is Sean Hise. I am hosting again today as Andre is out at a leadership conference. I'm excited. I kind of getting used to this role.
You should take it.
I
Sorry,
like it.
sorry, Andre.
Dre is usually sitting here, but Brandon's sitting next to me, so I'm gonna have to watch out. This dude's always moving around and slapping his mic around, so I'm kind of nervous about that. We also have Jacob, or how you doing, buddy?
Hey, what's up?
And he's also wearing a Pacers shirt today because we're excited because Carl Ceresoli.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, right out of the gate.
Yes.
Cheers.
Our
Nailed
first
it.
guess, and he got his name right.
I've been trying to, I assumed it was, I tried to put my Italian, thing on here. I've never said it correctly until just now, so I'm excited. I've known Carl, Jacob and I have known Carl since,
It's been a couple of years, actually, and then COVID, so it's even longer.
Yeah, exactly. COVID, the world froze, and we worked a little bit together when Carl moved, and we'll get into that, but we're really excited to have you on, Carl. And we're going to have a really exciting conversation about AI in sports today. But before we get going on that, we've got some news updates in the AI space. Starting off with an interesting article that we found while doing some research for the show, and it's something that you might never even think about in AI. So Google's got their model Bard.
Yep.
And I don't maybe the worst name ever.
I know it is.
I don't know.
Do you use it, by the way?
No, I don't
Okay.
use it.
Do you-
Jacob
the
loves
only Bard
Bard.
user here.
Are you? Okay, yeah.
But this made the news and she's one of those articles you're like, okay, great. And then you start scrolling, you're like, oh, I see the story here.
Right.
So Google reported, or actually CNBC reported that this company, Appen, APPEN, lost their contract unexpectedly. They're an Australian data company with Google. And basically, this company was providing services to help train Bard. And so they provide, a tremendous amount of service, but they're doing it with, I guess, really low-paid wage workers, and they're basically the people that are testing the model before the large language model before people like us get access to it. And so it opened up this whole conversation about Accenture, who's providing $10 an hour workers, Accenture, who's actually has contractors that are trying to join Google's union. And so it's kind of this weird, dark side or weird side of AI where you have, low-wage workers working on these new-aged large language models.
So they're low-paid employees, but is the work that they're doing ultimately just validating that if I ask an AI that it's giving me an answer that makes sense, right? But what you're saying is that part of the thing that they have to go through is exposure to all of the bad stuff that we ultimately have to make our large language model not output.
True.
Right. So they have to go and basically be like, hey, write me a, completely inappropriate poem about, whatever, my brother and sister. And then they have to read that and validate, did it work, did it not work? So that's kind of the beef, is that these people are getting exposed to things. But if we would go and we'd say the same thing for people who work at Pornhub, it is kind of different though, right? I mean, the people at Pornhub have to actually watch video. They have to verify that the stuff that's coming in is within their, respectable range. But with this, there's not video. There's not, what are they seeing that's actually bad, I guess?
I don't know. I think that it's just really interesting that you have this next generation system and these models, and now you're looking at people in Kenya getting paid. It's like the new sweatshops.
Yeah.
It's the layer just below the layer, and anything tech and shiny, right? And once you go one layer down, all of the darkness starts to come out, right? And all of the variables that nobody had any idea were there are like, well, wait, what? AI is this beautiful shiny thing, and then you kind of look and you go, but wait a second, that doesn't seem about right. That doesn't seem right.
That seems kind of on point too with just how things go, right?
Yeah.
Like shiny and then right below the surface.
Yeah, I feel like we're exiting the honeymoon phase here, and we're starting to see how the sausage is made a little bit. And we're like, oh, okay.
Well, I think if you bring it back to the 101 AI stuff. AI is not just this black magic box, right? You have, and we'll talk about this a little bit with sports, is, you have to train. You have to have training data, but you have to reinforce that training data with real world examples. And so you can't just say, okay, we trained it, now the AI is learning and it's doing its neural networks and it's always going to be right. Like, you have to have somebody sitting there going, no, tune that, that's not right. And a lot of times what we're seeing now is that's a worker that's not getting paid very much. So interesting. Check it out. Check out.
I work in AI. I get paid $8 an hour.
So maybe the next you're not flipping burgers anymore. You might be training AI algorithms.
But man, I don't know. Like out of all the shitty jobs that you can have, that one seems like it might not be that bad. Right? You're literally just you're sitting there and just be like, yeah, that's good, that's bad, that's good. I've actually built a few different tools for an insurance client of mine that lets basically just people sit there and just, a photo comes up and you've got to go highlight where the damage is, right? And you just click, and you say what the damage is. Click, and that's all your job is. I think we're going to get to a point where you're just going to have entire armies of people. That's all they do is they just click, identify, and they become kind of like these human intelligence tasks. Their only purpose is to ultimately feed the artificial intelligence.
Which will ultimately replace them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that's also, it's an interesting thing because most individuals' assumption with AI, at least how it's sold, is that is an automated process,
Totally.
right? That's this.
Yeah.
But the reality, again, that's another layer down. It's beyond the shine of AI. And then you realize, wait a second, these models, these things that everybody assumes are happening like this, and it's, the AI is well, no,
Kinda.
not exactly. Maybe in a couple weeks once, or maybe in a couple years, but there's still a human element in there. And that human element, depending on who it is, and especially with this article, the thought is that element is adding a variable into the equation.
Totally. Yep.
And it's not controlled, and it's maybe not as accurate as thought.
Well, one thing that kind of blew my mind was so when we talk about a lot of these open source models that are being released, right? They're just like releasing the model and they're like, well, it's not comparable to ChatGPT. And what people don't realize is there's ChatGPT, yes, is a model, but there is layers and layers and layers of process and rules and guardrails that make it function the way that it's supposed to function. And only those came up because some human was sitting there basically doing that kind of work.
So check it out. There is multiple sides to AI. For our next article, we have an interesting development, which is basically the next version of Chrome is going to ship with generative AI features. So you've had the concept in Chrome of grouping your tabs for a while. I don't know if some of my employees and some of the people I see, oh, you're grouping your tabs, good for you. I'm still like, all across the screen.
Do you guys group them?
I do profiles.
Yeah.
And because I work
do
on
profiles.
I do profiles, but no, I don't group them.
No, I don't.
And that's just, I don't do manual stuff, right? So now Chrome's coming in and they're saying, okay, we're gonna group your tabs for you.
Okay.
Which I think is a good example of, hey, let's release this feature. It's been out for a year or two, maybe probably longer. I just never used it. But now they're saying, hey, we're gonna do that with AI.
We'll just do it for
nice
you.
move. So that, and they've got basically help me write, so generative content.
The writing,
text boxes.
okay, so that one absolutely makes all the sense to me in the world. That's an actual practical feature that makes sense that people will actually leverage, right? The tabs thing, whatever.
Yeah.
Do you think that's the gateway drug where like Bard gets a lot more market share because everyone uses Chrome? And what model are they going to use to do the generative AI for your input or your text box?
Do people care?
Right.
Well, the question is that Jacob's posing, though, I think is, who's paying for this?
Yeah, it's expensive.
So is this a gateway drug to Bard's paid model? Or is the future of AI generally this free, please use Google, please use Microsoft? And I guess that question for Carl, with Copilot and all the stuff that's going on, with trying to build these tools into office products like browsers and is there
the net is that everything ultimately points towards some element of paid, right? I mean, free is great. Free's the drug. Free's the thing that they put out there. But the net is that the alignment is to ultimately generate revenue somehow from this, and that's the component. Whether it be, and I hate to use it, but because I'm so fatigued by the word subscription. Everybody wants you to subscribe another $9 here, another $20 here, another $9. But that's the goal, right? How else does this survive? How else do you fund these types of components efficiently, unless you can push people? And ChatGPT, right, is a great example of that. There's the free version, which does some neat things, but hey, you really want to do the cool stuff? You really want it to do this? $19.95 a month, and all these other things happen.
To every single AI product.
No, it's ridiculous.
Right?
So I don't
Right?
we actually left that in the dust. But yeah, I mean, if you want to generate cool cat images like we did on Instagram yesterday, you better pay. So you guys are mostly a Microsoft organization, right?
As an entity, yes.
Yeah. So have you guys been adopting like the Copilot and stuff? Is that stuff that's just coming down, and how's that work? Have you seen any of that, like in the day-to-day workers perspective?
So it's not necessarily yet as far as what ends up on a desktop or what ends up taking place within a corporate entity, but where we're seeing it come into play is more on the back-end management components of things. The back-end distribution, and I mean, there's the obvious play with cybersecurity, right? And all of the things that Microsoft is integrating into their platform, where it's no longer the separate element that's over here. It's everything is fully integrated, and that's an area where AI is playing a part. But as far as out to the end user or people in the organization leveraging AI to consume or to do various things, I'm probably a little bit premature for that.
That's interesting, because a couple episodes ago, we were actually talking about the best use case right now is back-end services and admin functionality, and less of just giving, because everyone jumps to like put the chatbot on the front of the website.
Well, the chatbot, though, that is really interesting because, believe it or not, there's pushback now from a legal perspective on leveraging the chatbot with a number of different class action suits that have been leveraged around privacy, right? Yes. It's one of those things where, let's do this. It was really cool, and a number of organizations in the marketing area pushes this and wants to leverage it because there's this perceived value. And then once it gets out there, the technical people are usually late coming up, going, and then legal's even later, right? And then everybody goes, but wait, I think we may have an issue. And then by that time, the lawsuit's already been filed.
So that's a good question for a CTO, CIO. Like, is part of the challenge with AI right now, like the shadow IT piece, like where people are going out and getting involved, like the business is trying to go get AI and bring it in themselves, which is just like any other thing they would do, right?
That's always a challenge,
right?
And just about any organization that has any sizable IT or any sizable marketing group, right? It's trying to get that balance of having the departments within your organization recognize that these things are no longer really simple light switches, little simple like on-off things. They're intensely complex, and to really have them be effective in your organization, as we were just talking about earlier, training the model, right? Well, you may connect with a vendor that is going to provide you this service, but the component, we need to train this on you, and we need this information. Well, I can't send you that information because it's protected, and there's privacy issues here. And then, well, we can't train, or the person sending it doesn't realize there are protections required around that data, and that's where other internal AI wraps that and won't let them send that out of our environment. So there's a chicken horse kind of type of thing, scenario, whatever you want to call it. But shadow IT is less of an issue now, believe it or not, than it was 10 years ago. Just because of the complexity, I think there's recognition in most entities that tech has a good side, but the bad side has real teeth when it's bad.
Yeah.
And that's where a number of organizations get bit. And they've got bit hard enough where that will show up in the press. And that resonates with leadership, right? That resonates with everybody going, hey, I don't want to be that entity. I don't want to be that example. Let's make sure that we're in alignment here.
Right. That's awesome. That's really good information. And then lastly, I think we had something. Oh, yeah. And this is going to be a good segue into the next conversation. There was a Brandon found it actually. There's an interesting
Weekly found it.
Weekly. Big Cheese Weekly.
Yep.
Check out BigCheese.AI. So Brandon's built this great news aggregator on there, and it's actually got some good compliments on LinkedIn. We use that to find our articles actually. And,
Because he messaged
not me today because I didn't use
He's
it.
like, what article should we be? I'm like, hold on.
I'm like sitting there working. So the podcast prep sometimes is
A wee bit last minute every once in a while.
at least on the sometimes.
Some of the news. The news is always last
The
minute.
news last, yeah.
That's
But anyway,
We
so
want the freshest news.
Exactly, that's
we
it.
wanted to find something in the news that was a little bit relevant to today's topic. So, there's a really cool article on MIT's technology review website about how AI is changing gymnastics judging, and basically what's happened is that you're looking at an extremely subjective sport when it comes to scoring. Right, it's not like basketball. If you get dunked on, it's 2 points. Right, if you shoot a 3-pointer, your foot's behind the line, it's 3 points. If you foul,
That's subjective.
Yeah, that's subjective, right? But if you do the pirouette and the back handspring and the whatever, don't know anything about gymnastics.
Except for you just broke out pirouette like you've been saying it for
Is that
100
a
years.
Is that a thing?
Yeah, that kind of rolled off the tongue.
Yeah, that was very smooth.
My gymnastics experience stopped after Carrie Strug did the the vault on a sprained ankle. That was badass.
Mine was those are skaters that beat each other with baseball bats or whatever it was back in the 90s.
Tanya Harding.
That's it.
Can you believe that Margot Robbie,
playing her?
Barbie was the one that played Tanya Harding in the Tanya Harding movie?
Oh, I didn't know that.
No.
Like probably the prettiest
Yeah.
woman in the world.
Right.
Like Tanya
Yep.
Harding.
Playing Tanya Harding.
Anyways, I digress.
Plus-
So AI is actually being implemented in gymnastics at the championship level. And what they basically did is in the 2023 World Championships, they implemented it and it highly impacted the outcome of the tournament. And so there were some challenges. There were some basically they can go to a review system, and that review system isn't, how like it works in the NBA. I mean, all about it. We'll get into the NBA and the NFL, but they go and they put their goggles on, right, and they review it. But this is actually getting a recommendation from an AI system.
Oh, okay. So
They're saying no, that their leg missed.
had a slight little bend in it, or the shoulder wasn't square, or whatever.
And so, in a super subjective sport, I think that they're basically looking at this and they're saying this is actually could potentially change the sport, potentially for the better, potentially for the worse.
So ultimately, though, do we get to a point with these ones that are highly subjective by the judges that we ultimately just say, let's get rid of the judges. We're going to have an AI that's going to basically be the future. Because the same thing happens with UFC, right, or any MMA. If it goes to the judges, you've got a very big chance that you're going to get screwed out of that, right? Because again, they're so subjective. If you watch the Sean Strickland fight everybody was on the fence. So do we eventually just get to a point where we just say we're going to let AIs be the judges?
I'm not sure, though, short term on that, where that ends up. Like, gymnastics is a very technically oriented, it's all technique, right? So it's from an AI perspective, you either do this thing this way or not, right? There's a perfect, you can define, and that's what the judges are supposed to be using, all of these variables, but they're known. In the pro sports realm, like baseball, basketball, it's less subjective, right? There's a whole bunch of different variables at play, especially when it comes down to a foul, right? And then there's the what do you call the quote unquote flopping factor, where
now they're saying the marginal contact thing. Have you noticed that?
So it's a little bit different of a scenario, I think, in my mind, and I think in something like gymnastics, maybe you could get there because historically there's been a number of different things that have happened where you've got judges from different countries, all with different opinions and different influencing factors.
Yeah,
right?
well, I always wondered in gymnastics, like the underlying story of this gymnast is really good, and a very emotional, like high energy routine. But technically, was she? I don't know the first thing about it. So like, can we go back and like review what AI would have thought their score was versus?
Well, and that's actually such a great point, because that's what they talk about in the article, is like somebody could be really outstanding from a performance perspective, and that actually comes into play in the sport. but they weren't as technical. They missed a couple of the things, but they did they really presented well. Right, but I guess that's maybe
energy. Have you seen the pig? This is so off topic, but the girl who does like the pig shows and like the look in her eyes. Anyone seen on this TikTok?
No.
Okay. Just me.
I'm not sure what that's about.
Okay, I'm googling pig TikTok.
Pig TikTok.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I think as we start talking more about sports, you look at AI and it seems to be impacting the evaluation piece of sports. Where it's like, okay, in the MLB, balls and strikes are being called by cameras and AI in the minor league system. If it's in, you have, and that's not really necessarily AI yet per se. Maybe it is, but you have other sports as well that's really coming into play, and I think they're trying to take out subjectivity. Right. Where they can. Right.
But the push at MLB is a great example, balls and strikes, right? That seems like that should have been able to been put in place years ago.
Right.
But there's a reason it hasn't. There's called the purists within the sport that are like, no, the umpire has a role, and that's part of the purity of the game. Sometimes you get the calls, sometimes you don't, right?
It's like what they call Assembly Hall down in Bloomington, the Hall of Calls. Like the refs go down there and they influence the game. And it's just part of the game.
Okay, so the human element is actually a critical part in this.
It kind of is.
You might have a gymnastic or gymnast who does something amazing. While it might not be the most technical thing, but it hit that like inner nerve that we have in our brain or whatever, right? Where it's just like woo, like where an AI wouldn't be able to appreciate that.
And it's part of the entertainment of the game. Where would baseball be without the coach running out of the dugout, kicking the dirt? Right? I mean, it's all part of the entertainment factor
a really good point,
of the event, right? And you wouldn't have that. You'd have it would be relatively boring. You wouldn't have the crowd cheering, all of the various things that they do. That's worth something. As funny as that may seem, there's an entertainment value there that, for better or for worse, that's provided that AI wouldn't.
So are they like weighing the cost of getting a call wrong versus the cost of losing? Like, what's the equation there? Because I hear what you're saying, and that makes a ton of sense to me. Of like, that is part of it. A missed call, we got screwed. And my team, I love this team, and now I'm mad, but I'm also more engaged. So like,
you'll be back.
Yeah.
You'll be back.
I don't think I've ever thought about it that way, but that's absolutely part of it. There's absolutely part of it. Have you ever seen what the soccer ref does after the VAR reviews? They walk out like in this extraordinarily long walk out to the field, and everyone's like waiting for the call and
an element of drama.
And then he points down at the penalty box, and you're like, oh my god! But he didn't make that call, but he went out and made it super dramatic, right? He drew the attention in, and that is part of the game. I don't think that basketball or baseball or, you're right, I don't think it would be as entertaining without the human element.
Yeah, it is absolutely a factor.
All right, good point. Yeah. Well, let's get into the meat of this. So, Carl, thanks again for joining. We have been mostly focused our energy on AI tooling, startups, SaaS, and one of the things that we haven't necessarily gone down to privacy. We haven't necessarily looked at a specific industry or even at a higher level where you have a large organization. What you do is multi-dimensional. You work for Pacer Sports and Entertainment, which is not just basketball. You've done a lot of things in the last couple of years, but so you're going to be a great wealth of knowledge for us. But just kind of give the audience a little bit an understanding of who you are, your background, how you got to Indianapolis. I love your story and just want to kind of kick it off so people can kind of get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, so I've been in the tech industry for a while. So prior to current role with the Pacers, was at Starbucks in Seattle, and then was Microsoft before that.
Like actual Starbucks corporate.
Not an apron. Although I did go through that program, but not at one of the stores.
You weren't
not
a barista,
right? Okay. But although that's a tough job.
Yeah.
But no, I ran global networks and infrastructure there. It was a lot of fun, great organization. And then before that was with Microsoft, also in Seattle. And before that was with AT&T. I've always kind of been in the role of innovation within tech and pushing concepts. I ran a really cool lab at AT&T for several years, pushing out all types of different things within that organization, both internal process type of tech as well as things that would ultimately end up in the consumers' hands, but have done startups along the way as well. So kind of all over the place from everything from startup to Fortune 500.
And so what are some of the well, I guess I can just kind of spoil it. The All-Star game is coming to Indianapolis for those that aren't.
Oh wow!
It is.
I have no idea.
It's just our entire airport's a
It's
basketball
been in the news
floor.
for a little bit. You know, it's one of those things that's been out there.
Before we got to the ice stuff, I did want to ask, like, how's that been going? Like, are you guys excited over there?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
A lot of fun. It's going to be a great event. It's going to be a great event for the city. A lot of people working hard to make sure that everything goes off without a hitch. But it's going to be an incredible event. All types of, and it's actually not just a day anymore. It's a whole week's worth of activity with a number of things happening at the Convention Center, Lucas Oil, as well as at Gamebridge.
When's this all happening?
The week of February 16th.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome.
Which is great because that's the weekend that my wife decided that we're going to Disney World.
Yeah. Good luck with
I
that.
don't
Well,
talk about
I'll
it.
take some photos for you.
And we're only going for like 3 days, just those 3 days, literally. I'll be there for the early week stuff. So tell us, I guess, from your perspective, tell us a little bit about, we'll start with like kind of the Pacers sports and entertainment side, then we can kind of talk about the NBA. Just talk to us a little bit about, how AI, especially in the last year, has impacted anything you guys are doing.
Well, before we get into that,
yeah,
though,
sorry,
actually,
yeah.
real quick, before we get into that, I'm kind of curious how you got into the sports and to just AI in general. So before you start telling us about it, but because again, you were at Microsoft, you're at Starbucks.
Yeah,
was sports a big thing?
No, and there's a story behind that as well, but I hadn't. I shouldn't say this on
No,
here.
you absolutely should. That's why we
hadn't-
get the deep cuts.
I hadn't watched a basketball game. So my father and I used to watch the NBA all the time, and my father passed away a number of years ago. But we were watching a game together, and a fight broke out. Right? I won't say which fight.
Was this the classic fight?
Well, I didn't know that at the time, but so a fight broke out, and we both were fairly disgusted by what we had seen, and I went through that whole thing, and we didn't watch another game after that. And then just out of happenstance, I got a call from a recruiter, and then ended up talking to a number of different people, and ended up at the Pacers. They had a lot of work needed to be done, but I was actually walking the hall like 3 or 4 weeks after I started, and bumped into somebody, and they were talking about something, and then they brought up, and we're fully recovered in this fight, and it was just like, oh my gosh, I stopped watching because of that fight. And that was the Pacers, Malice at the Palace, and all that other stuff, right? I had no idea until that moment.
It all came full
Yeah, I was like,
circle.
oh, whoa.
That was one of the most impactful things I've ever seen on television, let alone sports. So, I mean, I can totally see that. It impacted people very differently, and it impacted the city tremendously.
Yeah.
It was a very low moment. It took us a long time to recover, and Rick Carlisle was the coach of the team when that happened, and then he ended up, now he's back.
Yeah.
So it's been a redemption story for the city. But yeah, the organization's obviously from a technology perspective, so blessed to have you as a part of it. I've seen what you guys have done, especially from a networking infrastructure and other things you guys have done. It's awesome over there. They completely redid the building. I went to a concert there not too long ago. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, there's been a lot of hard work that's gone into not only the kind of the brick and mortar, but all of the tech is new in the facility. From when I started to today, there isn't anything that was there when I started that's still running. Everything is gone. All new core switch and round, all new wireless, that's on the side of the business that the guests see when they come into the facility. But we're also 400-person corporate entity with all, a couple $100 million in revenue, with all the tech complications that come with that. And on that side of the equation, everything is also now you mentioned earlier, we are generally standardized on the Microsoft stack for a number of different reasons. This is not because I come from Microsoft, although
Right.
although that network has helped out quite a bit. But that's where a lot of people look at pro sports, and I got this for the first 2 years that I was here. What does CTO for pro sports entity do? So you do the big screen, right? Yeah. You do this, and I'm like, well, there's a little bit more to it than that. We're actually a pretty big company, and we actually have all these systems and all of these other things that go on. But it's been a heck of a run, though. A lot of fun.
It's I would say, just as an observer, it's a high stakes job.
Yeah.
It
you
really
screw up, and it generally gets out on TV somewhere, and something happens, and you're, it's sweat.
And
definitely sweat.
I'm going to give credit to Carl. Carl is actually the one that fixed the Bally Sports streaming. He actually figured it out. He was the one.
Yeah,
that
not even close. I don't want to
because it's great now. Totally water under the bridge.
Yep,
Bally.
no, that was me. Wasn't me.
So what are you guys like? It is like from a corporate perspective. I think we kind of covered it. I mean, is AI on the business side of Pacer Sports and Entertainment like the constant thing, or is it a slow drip? Because I mean, everybody's adopting it in different ways.
Yeah, I would say that it's probably more today, to use your term, slow drip, right? So pro sports is this really interesting entity where it's a very high profile industry, right? So the logo, we're very much a local company, but we have a global brand, and then we're under the NBA moniker. So on the AI side, there's a lot of entities that want to bring that in and focus on things like injury prediction, player performance. We have a lot of AI that I don't think the industry is really ready to talk about yet, running in various states, learning and being trained. And we're looking, and that though ultimately the industry is looking at focusing that on gambling, right? Major revenue centers, and how do you feed these animals that exist that thrive on data, right? So that's where a lot of it ultimately enters the space, and when I look at it, then it's a little bit different from an evaluation perspective. I bring kind of, hey, is this real? Or when it comes in from an outside entity, is this real? Is this something that this PowerPoint presentation that they're talking about can land, and we can actually do something with it, and it delivers something of value?
That's interesting.
Or is this something that, it's this great PowerPoint, but hey, missing are these things, right. Privacy, all of the various things.
How many times have you been pitched, and it could be zero, how many times in the last year or so, since let's say since ChatGPT became a household term, have you guys been pitched on an AI product for the Pacers that really missed the privacy concept of having the data exposed?
All of them. It's a very high percentage. Yeah. And again, it's a number of these entities, they're not, when they come in and talk to us, they're not the large companies that are in the space. It's startups. It's this, that, and the other. And startups don't always, their priorities are not necessarily always aligned with.
I can spell HIPAA 2 P's, right?
Right, exactly. So, and then when you go to overlay, your legal issues and your insurance components and the indemnity clause, and then they go, and it's silence, and then you got a problem. And that therein is part of the issue, right? And I think that's kind of a hurdle that we got to try to figure out how to overcome, because right now, the exposure for us, we're a target, right? And when you look at indemnity, when you look at the repercussions of privacy, those things are becoming very real. The teeth and those components are pretty sharp.
Is that and this may probably differs from every single organization, but is that something that the technology aspects of the business, like the CT, like your direct reports, are evaluating, or is that something that procurement and legal are now getting wise to?
It's that's a gray area, right? So it used to be everybody was in their silo, and legal wasn't necessarily something that the technical folks looked at. Now you've got to be aware of all of that. There's no way you sit in a meeting, there's no way you have the conversations without having those pieces in the back of your mind. In fact, a number of people on my staff are going for certifications in this now, legal certifications, so that you can get ahead of some of the things. Because if you don't catch them early enough and you get all the way to the point where legal's reviewing a contract, it's too late. And then you've got, no, this is missing, that, and this is missing, and that's missing, and you completely stall out these things. It's
What are some of the coolest, never gonna work, pie in the sky ideas that you've heard?
I'm not sure I can talk about some
Okay,
of them.
that's fine. What are some
there
of
are-
them?
So I'm kind of curious. Is there much that's coming down at the top from the NBA that's saying, hey, we have now a couple things that we think that everybody in the entire organization should be considering?
So the NBA has an event annually. It's during Summer League. They have two events. The big one is during Summer League, and that's in Vegas, and it's a summit around technology and pro sports. So I attended the one this past year, and it was predominantly AI. So it was injury prediction. There was a lot of AI around micro betting, which is a really interesting concept.
Micro betting, you mean like I'm throwing 50 cents that he's gonna make that one shot?
So micro betting is particularly interesting because it requires a lot of data to function. So the concept in general, just to review it real quickly, is you walk into any arena or pro sporting event or a sporting event, and you have whatever app it is that league requires or arena requires. And when you walk in, the app knows you're there and it says, hi, so-and-so, welcome to blah, blah. You already have your profile all set up, and it said, would you like to participate in micro betting? And yeah, okay. So then you're sitting in the stands, and AI knows you and knows what you like to bet on. It says, do you want to right now place 50 cents so that when they inbound the ball, it's going to bounce once as opposed to twice?
Okay.
Or that they're going to pass from this person to that person. Or this very specific, unique thing is going to take place. And if it's obviously more complex than that, and there are a number of different variables involved for it to happen successfully, specifically when it comes down to infrastructure, not only just the AI, but the infrastructure in the arena to allow that type of low latency type of event to take place. It adds another element of fun. It's very unique.
So you're talking about really almost like a in-person retail aspect of betting, not just a kind of, your typical FanDuel in-game, the spread changed stuff. You're talking about pattern recognition betting.
It's very, very specific, very unique to you. And you might be sitting here, and 3 seats over, somebody might be on the same application, and they may get a different micro bet than you.
How are these whoever's facilitating the bet getting their odds? Like, I imagine that would be very difficult to understand the risk of, okay, if I ask, how many people can fit in the stadium, 16, 17,000? So
that's the magic of AI. That's all just magic, and it just happens in the
Okay.
and nobody really knows.
Some magic. We were looking for it the whole podcast.
There it was, right? It's just whatever.
Well, I know if it's Andrew Nemhard, he's going to bounce it. It's going to bounce twice.
Yeah.
Every single time
Every
he brings
time.
the ball before. I'm
Hey,
like,
you
just
would get that bet.
But yeah, that's that, and that's one of the more interesting concepts that's generally out there. I think that they've tried it, and it was fairly successful. I think last year at MLB All-Star, one of these events. They've tried it in different arenas. But as I said, here's again one of the pro sports AI. When you look at just the general concept, part of my job is when these entities come in and it's a fan-facing concept, it's not only is that tech sound or can we actually get there, it's to take that and say, okay, this concept requires infrastructure to run on. And when you get into these stadiums, when you get into these event centers, that varies wildly, right?
Yep.
So to really have a shot at pulling this off, It comes down to, at the end of the day, latency, right? Everything comes down, especially with real time, with AI in this fashion. It's all about latency.
That reminds me, sorry, but I coached wrestling for a long time, and there was this app called Track Wrestling, and the number one problem they had, it's real time score update or tracking the actual match and putting it out there to anyone who has the app of what's going on, what's the score, all that stuff, and they're doing it at a computer. But most of these events happen at schools, and schools, while they have fairly good Wi-Fi, it's not great.
Yeah,
and it's different between that school and that school.
Right.
So that was the number one feedback I always heard
latency
was,
is
yeah.
we were Wi-Fi channel because it's incredibly complex to do that at scale, to provide that type of environment at scale.
What we're talking about is much different than all the conversations we've had.
Yeah.
Right? You're talking about a model that's being trained on these huge GPUs, on these unbelievable data sets. It's not real time. Now, sure, ChatGPT can go to Bing for me, which I do use that. But you're talking about real-time analysis. And that's what I think is an interesting distinction. So a lot of the tech that's in the NBA stadiums is based off cameras right now.
Yes.
Right? And so they're taking cameras and they were doing that. They've been doing that for much longer than even other sports. Hasn't some of that
it's been
basic
around.
infrastructure been around for quite a while?
It's been around for quite a while. It started a number of years ago with Intel doing the experiment and coming in and putting all of the cameras in, and they did NBA and I think NFL and some NHL arenas, and that was more. And they did that on their expense to kind of see what was possible. So a number of years ago, if you were watching an event, a basketball on television, and it was nationally televised, they did and it would come after they came back from commercial break. They would do here's the shot, and they would swing around.
Yeah.
So that was done by the system. There wasn't necessarily AI; it was just video processing, and the images were being built with AI. But that was all just video processing. But that was just to see what was possible. It's advanced several generations and very, very quickly from that. Those systems are no longer in operation, but there are other systems that have been deployed that are fully operational.
So who's making that investment? Is that the NBA that's making that investment?
Sure. It's a combination of the leagues that are paying for that investment, as well as the tech industry and a couple of key companies that are bringing that element into the equation.
So from an injury prevention perspective, like what are they looking for? What types of patterns is it just they just figured out a way to analyze it, or is it more like stats? Like is it the camera stuff, or is it like just raw data stuff?
So it's not necessarily what happens in the arena. So they now have sensors in the gear that they're working out with and the exercise equipment that are measuring all of these variables. And as well as...
Sorry, real quick. Yeah. They've got cameras in the workout rooms as well?
No, not in the workout rooms.
Biometrics?
Yeah, so it's biometrics as well as embedded sensors in the gear that they're using.
Oh, so the actual machines that they're using.
Yes. And this was, just to be clear, this is not necessarily tech that's deployed. This was at being highlighted at the event, right? So it was a number of different companies that were there talking about, well, if I look at all of these variables and I know the human body, and then you input all of this information on player XYZ and their various conditions, and I run you through this MRI scan that looks at these things, I can then predict certain things that you're doing. And what they found is that they can determine the difference between muscle groups and even left leg versus right leg, and players that choose and favor certain muscle groups. And if you were to change your training to eliminate this bias, this unknown element, you can improve your performance by looking at all of these various things.
That's really, really interesting.
Yeah, it's very, very complex, but I think we're still a couple of years from it really translating from, again, a controlled presentation to something that your trainers could operate. I mean, there's that element, right? When you implement it in the real world, you don't have a whole tech organization there to facilitate that every time.
This reminds me of a couple of our conversations we've had before of like, we would look at this tech and we would start the conversation with, all right, who's going to lose their job or whatever. But it's interesting because it sounds like a trainer could do their job better in this case.
That's the goal.
Yeah, it's like, and definitely LeBron's going to sit on the second night of a back-to-back, but that's just probably that's built into the system probably, right?
Yes.
Well, what level of accountability do you really have?
No comment.
If you're a professional athlete, your job is to take care of your body,
Yeah.
right? And the training staff's job is to help you do that.
Devil's advocate here. Let me throw, and this is not necessarily. I'll put this out there, but right. So you're a professional athlete, and there's all of this information out there on you now. Your contract's coming up for renewal.
Yeah, I mean, like I was just thinking about the social credit score for the NBA guys.
That's what it
Like,
what
is
it turns
DeAndre
into.
Jordan on the Nuggets really going in, getting in the weight room at 4 a.m.? Is he Kobe? No, we probably not. Maybe he's so mad at me right now. Sorry, dude. But like there's If I was the MBPA, I would be very concerned.
So yeah, and this is true for most pro sports, and I'm speaking not just for the NBA. In no way do I represent anything. It's just in
nothing-
general. Yeah,
Carl does not represent any thoughts of the Pacers Sports and Entertainment or the NBA.
Yeah. But from when you get to know and understand how these industries work, there's two sides to the equation. There's the players' associations generally with most of these leagues. And the players' associations are there to look out for the best interest of the athletes, and you have all of this information that's about to be dumped into that process, and these variables that teams want to look at to assess value that could be potentially brought to this side of the organization. Well, that value now is a variable, right? And if you were looking at this and AI says, well, we're seeing all of these things, but the reality is it's not part of the equation today, and it could be tomorrow, and that is something that seriously has to be looked at from not only from a privacy perspective, but the downside, the negative consequences of that.
Yeah, so you're talking about health data about a person being shared with the person that's doing payroll and trying to figure out the next contract.
Potentially, yeah.
So is there a wall up between the training staff potentially that they might write into the agreement?
Right, and those walls are only as thick and as right. Yeah. That's what the players' association would say. Well, there's a wall up, but the reality is,
and just like the gymnastics situation, like that an athlete might have had a dip in their performance from a workout perspective or whatever, but maybe his brother was in the hospital for a few weeks, or he tweaked or just like
there could be penalties associated with that. If I'm a gymnastics and I miss several training sessions, or I'm not, AI would be able to determine, hey, are they giving 100% in practice? Well, according to what it's looking at, the answer is no, but it doesn't take into account why. It just says no, and the repercussions of that, well, that immediately triggers penalties for this, and this.
I think you said it earlier, like we're getting past this phase now, but everybody thinks AI is magic and also flawless in its assessment, and it's only as good as the data you put. And this is just another real world example of that, where it's like it can give you an idea of what's going on, but it's still up to you, whatever application you're using it in, it's still up to you. It's your responsibility to understand what does that actually translate to? What were the other variables it couldn't possibly have understood? So
I was reading this article from 2020, and it was about an analytics employee from the Atlanta Hawks, and they were talking about AI in the NBA, and it was really the machine learning stuff they were doing with the pattern recognition. So they were doing new stats that never existed. So you used to have points, assists, rebounds, or PER, just basic stats, but they were doing more like what's your pick and roll rate and what's your the stuff that was derived from cameras and pattern recognition. And they were like talking about he was talking about how like their models predicted that LeBron and D Wade going to Miami would have no impact on the success of the team because their roles were too similar and they took bad shots. And I'm like, well, that's the AI element, but the human element shows that they won what? I guess they only won 2 championships.
Yeah,
You said they were
still-
going to win,
Yeah,
not
still-
6, not 7. Wait, you're going to be 50, LeBron. You can't keep counting up.
2 is more than 0, though.
Yeah, but more than 0, right? And that they didn't understand the human element of that. It's like
it's LeBron James and Dwayne Wade. They're
It's-
going to be able to adjust
or
their
Eric
game.
Spoelstra,
Yeah,
or just like just like the vibe that team, the other players they had,
Right.
like, and so bad take, bro. But you just looked at the data. You didn't look at what it could be like if a human says, well, I need to take less shots because LeBron James is the best player in the world.
Right, that comes down to, again, with the humans in the equation. The scouting staffs will tell you that human element. And if you look at, this was a while ago, this was before AA, but the movie Moneyball, right?
Yeah.
Oh, we
and
were
you had
just talking about this.
you had the scouting staffs sitting around the table going, "You're never gonna." The reality is, it's more of a balance.
Yeah.
It's another data factor, but it's not the only one. And a lot of times, it's by far there's a number of elements that far outweigh that one factor to determine success. And
Yeah, the Moneyball stat that's the most impactful you have to learn from is the ugly girlfriend stat. He goes, he a great hitter, ugly girlfriend though.
That reminds me. I was reading this book, and they were talking about predictions later in the season, specifically for basketball. But it was teams that aren't very good in the beginning of the season, and then they give a lot of if there's a lot of butt
this is
slaps
great.
and backs, lots of camaraderie is a generally an indicator for future success. And I'm like, they were doing this manually. They were just literally watching videos and saying that team is giving more high fives to each other than that team. And sure enough, at one data point, but I'm sure there was more.
There is no doubt. Pro sports, sports in general, it's a very emotional task. It's a very emotional event, right? So those elements with that AI is pretty binary, right? It's ones and zeros. They tend not to translate and capture components like that. The superstitions, all of those things are real things. They're real elements of the game that I'm not sure. Well, AI, I know today, right? There's no component, maybe in the future, but right now, there's the whole, when a batter walks up to the plate, there's the tap, 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 tap. There's those elements that derive confidence that help them feel more at home, that it's not a 1 or 0 thing.
Where an AI would start telling you, hey, you need to tap your shoulders to make sure you get that
You missed
hit,
one,
right?
and watch.
So what's the conclusion? It's 2024. There's AI is taking over, but is the future? What is the future of AI in sports from your perspective? Is it a backseat? Is it in the forefront? Is it transformational, or is it just something that's just there?
So, it certainly has the potential to be transforming, depending on who's selling it, right? It has that potential. But I think right now, today, it's something that's present. And everybody's just searching to go, okay, well, this is here. And the obvious pieces are gambling. It has the potential to generate a lot of real-time stats to feed the casinos, to feed the online apps and things of that nature. There's those elements that are relatively obvious. I think the other components we're still a little ways away. They've still got to play out well. There's the piece that I always say, you can have the best bit of tech in the world, but there's the training element that comes for the staff, right? Because you still have the physical therapists. You got all these people that they're not going to lose their jobs. They just need to be up-leveled on the training now to incorporate this into their process for evaluation, and that's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah.
So I'm not very good at the sports, as we would say. But so at a
You do have some chicken legs.
Hey, now. From a betting side, you've mentioned it kind of multiple times now that the betting play does the NBA have is betting going to be a thing, or do they have to kind of keep a separation of it? It seemed like you need to, right?
Yeah, that's being driven by the app, number of different partners that we have in that space.
Okay.
But you've seen even ESPN has now. You've seen mainstream huge media companies are now.
They're leveraging, so we have the ability to leverage stats. That was, we did a project,
Yeah,
Sean and I
sure.
did a project on that where we did projection mapping in the real time. We took the stats feed and put that in the arena.
Yeah, we saw the real time NBA
Yeah.
stats. I mean, every single second we're getting these boom, boom, boom data feeds with just any single thing, and those are getting consumed, and their different properties are getting added to those objects all the time.
Yeah. So I mean that's a real thing, but we're in the business of generating those stats and then putting them out to partners, and then what the NBA wants to do with them from there. I can't necessarily speak to that,
Right.
but it's all about it comes down to that's kind of the end. There's all of this work that goes into ensuring, because once you say that you want to use these and then there's money involved, you got to be accurate.
Right.
You've got to have all of these other things lined up, and they have to be bulletproof, right?
Oh gosh.
Right. So because I think the classic example of that, and I think this within the public domain, was this started in arena gambling started a while ago, right? A number of seasons ago, where the number of different companies were trying something, and they were running an app. They were running the app in an arena during a live event, and they were looking at the stats, and they were allowing actual wagers to take place. And I don't know if you remember, that was the bottle being thrown in during the foul shot. So
Oops.
all of a sudden they saw this huge spike. Nobody knew what was happening. And then they went to go take the foul. Somebody threw the bottle, and it was all set up, right? So at that a second after that happened, everything stopped.
Yeah.
Because you can't control those elements. And that's the difference between that and micro betting. You don't have that component because it's
Right. Instant.
yeah. So there are a lot of challenges. It all sounds great. And like I said, you can put together a hell of a PowerPoint presentation on, it's going to be awesome, and these things are going to happen, and you can do this and
all
this and
gonna
this.
work.
My biggest takeaway from today is that Carl's seen a lot of AI PowerPoints.
Yeah.
And they don't work.
And every-
So I have to ask, just because. So I worked at a company called X-Ray Glass, and the whole premise here is for the deaf and hard of hearing to basically be able to have subtitles of whatever's going on. So this conversation, I'd have the subtitles, right? They're starting to see that there's potentially a draw into events, into games, and like this. Are you guys doing anything currently?
Yeah, that's great that you brought that up. We just actually finished an app, and we worked with Microsoft on it. So Microsoft brought in their team, and they actually did it just to assist with hearing impaired and people with visual challenges.
Right.
So the app is during a Pacers game, you can go into the arena, launch our Pacers app, and then there's a button during the game that says if you want to press
your
this.
subtitles.
Yeah. And the traditional closed captioning is system, and it goes off, and so it's there's been very little innovation in that space.
I need to watch that system at some point.
But we worked, and hats off to Microsoft. They actually use it's the ChatGPT engine behind it.
Oh, really?
So in real time during an event, the MC in arena, everything is closed caption, and it's real time, and that model is being trained as we speak, but it's getting more and more and more accurate. And we hope to, in the next little bit, have a button on there so you can change to different languages in real time as well.
So if you want, X-Ray can already do that.
Yeah, so they can. So we can do it as well.
Props to X-Ray.
It's available. I think we just haven't enabled it, but it would be available French, Mandarin.
And so that's all. Is that all through Microsoft then?
It was a project that they helped us do. So
but it's your product.
It's yes.
Okay.
It's running
That's
in our
cool.
environment.
Nice.
We asked them to help collaborate.
So you're the only? Is there other NBA teams doing the same one?
It is available, so we will make it available. It wasn't done. We're not going to derive any revenue from it. It was done because we saw the need for individuals coming into arenas that are asking for these types of services, and there was a gap in what existed today. So we developed it with them with the thought that, hey, if we get this and we get it right, go out to every arena that wants to enable us. It's very low touch. It's very lightweight.
Right.
It just requires everything. I mean, everything's running into the cloud, and it comes back down in the app.
Awesome.
Well,
pretty
props
quickly.
to you. And then for all the young engineers out there that are listening, accessibility is very important, and you should take it seriously because
Yeah, huge.
it's
Huge.
market.
It is a
It's-
huge market.
Yep.
There's lots of opportunity there, and it was a space that kind of lagged for a while, but now you're seeing
it's been
a
huge,
lot
yeah.
of a lot of different elements happening within the arena space to extend that experience that historically may not have been as fulfilling.
And accessibility is just good usability.
Yeah.
That's what we found. I mean, that's why Gen Z watches Netflix with no volume, right? It's just
with subtitles.
Or, yeah, with subtitles. It's
I
it's
just sit
you
there with
never-
it with it muted.
When you make something accessible, the applications are endless. It's not just. I mean, sure, it's really great for people that absolutely need it, but it's something that is it just becomes more useful than you ever thought it would.
Right, and that translates to, this is a great example, All-Stars an international event, and there will be people in arena speaking all types of languages, and this app's going to make that experience even better.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
We talked a little bit about this a few weeks ago, but just the intersection of like good and like good for business, and accessibility hits that mark very well.
It does.
And AI especially is very good at achieving some of these things that weren't possible before. We use like a text to speech tool a little bit, and if you've ever used like the auto speech readers on a website, they suck.
Yeah.
I'm super excited for anything involved in that space because it's just easier to consume the information.
And one of the challenges, though, the funny thing is that, well, the tech is there, right? The ability to do this is fairly. It comes down to the infrastructure then. So your MC's mic and how they're speaking into the mic and when they yell and the distortion.
Tyrese Halliburton.
Yes, all of that. And so we tried to use it. We tried to use it during a concert as well because it's the same thing. We can take any feed in the arena. We've got control over that. So we got the artist's permission to be able to take a feed from the stage. What happened was, I won't say who it was, but they were an older artist. And the people that were there knew all the words of the song, but what he was saying may or may not have been anything close to what it actually was. And
Sounds like Motley Crue.
Yeah,
or Guns N' Roses, if you
right.
ask me.
yes, it was that.
Give me
It
a
was
drink.
that. It was that. And AI was just like, I have no idea what this guy's saying.
See, you gotta have that human element.
Right.
That's why those closed caption guy on the Commodore 64 have
For
been
now.
jobs for 35
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. So it was
well,
pretty funny.
this has been, I think, great.
Been
A
awesome.
great Big Cheese.
It goes quick. It
Because
goes
this is
so
all- and
quick.
this has
It's
been
been
Is
an
it
long.
hour.
over? Has it been an hour?
This
been
has
an hour.
long, and I really thank you. That was awesome. I think it was we covered everything and more, and I think that this foray into having some unique perspectives is going to be good for us. So for all those don't know anything about Indianapolis, that's where we were based out of. The Indiana Pacers are playing basketball in the best arena in the world.
Basketball, right?
It's sports ball in Indianapolis.
We get the sports ball.
And the one of the greatest events is the NBA All-Star game, and that's going to be held here. And people wonder why events like that get held in Indianapolis, but it's because Indianapolis puts on events like no one. I grew up. My dad worked at a hotel downtown when I was a kid, and so I grew up in that.
It's going to be a hell of a show.
It's going to be a great show. I can't wait to see what you guys are putting on. I love the NBA All-Star jerseys with the pinstripes I saw this morning. And there's going to be a great Hoosier feel to it. Now, let's hope we get the same weather that we got for the Super Bowl when the Super Bowl was in Indy.
Yeah, right.
If not, I'm sure they'll have a plan. So check
And
us out.
a backup plan to that plan.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody does events like Indy. So thanks, Carl, for joining us. We look forward to great success for you and the Pacers, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.